developers, but you can certainly suggest strongly that those kinds of elements be in them. I mean, I would certainly try. But in terms of the county, I know that they are big on planning for bike trails, but they need the cooperation of everybody. And so coming to them is the same way you come to us, I think, is a good approach, and getting the information out there. There's a lot of groups that come to the county board and ask for stuff. And many of them in the social services area, but there are others too that have concerns. And the only way that they can be heard is to come to the hearings, raise the issue, get supervisors to recommend a change in an ordinance or a plan. And I mean, there's a process to be followed, but it can be done.
Well, so we probably all agree on the general outcome that we would like to see, the three of us. I would approach it from the standpoint of an overall plan. We need to begin with an overall plan. We need to define or develop the routes that we want to see within the city, and then connecting the city to the surrounding area, especially into Madison, to be able to bike into there. And then figure out how we do that. They are not necessarily have to be dedicated bike trails. I'm saying that in the future, the demand for roads for cars is going to decline, and we ought to pick that up with using some of those existing roadways for biking traffic. And that's exactly what they're doing in Chicago. Using some of those roadways that were designed and built for cars, they've now converted some of those over to streets. And we see that in Brooklyn when we're out there, and everybody survives with that. So I think the first thing you need to do is figure out what the routes are, what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to connect, and then figure out how you go about doing it. And I don't think it's necessarily dedicated bike paths. In fact, as a biker, I prefer not to use dedicated bike paths because they don't have the clear sight lines, and lots of times they're just too uneven road surfaces. I prefer to be out on the highways when it can be safe to be out on the highways, and I think we can make that happen.
And I'd be happy to cite an example. I mean, we just got done working with the county in terms of additional, I guess, working with existing road projects is another way of accomplishing a lot of these things. So, for example, the Highway C project, there's bike lanes, and there's actually some improvement to bike trails that will be in conjunction with that project. You know, it's approaching the county not just on those projects, but it's also going back in terms of grant funding. There's some amount of success that we've had in terms of grant funding through the county, and making sure that we take advantage of those opportunities. You know, certainly the easiest time to do it is when we're all planning to upgrade a road, because it's a lot less expensive. You aren't ripping up the area twice. But we understand that there are connecting areas that we have to address as well. So hopefully that is a partial answer at least to your question.
We've talked a lot about kind of getting around the city, and I guess I would like you guys to give me some ideas for how we can help some of our lower income neighborhoods connect with some of the growth areas and jobs that they might work in, because it seems like that would be a good idea to do to help fill some of our workforce needs. And so I wondered what ideas you had for that.
Well, in the three components of my vision, the transportation being one, is that we need to plan for the time that we're going to connect to the bus system, the Madison bus system. And as often as we've been talking here about county solutions, that transportation is going to be a county concept as well. Not necessarily that we're going to the county board to look at it, but in that 30 to 50 years, everybody in this room would agree that we're at some point going to connect to the Madison bus system. It just makes sense. And if you accept what I'm saying about people less inclined to drive and the cost of driving becoming more prohibitive, for those of us that can afford it now, much less the element of the population that already can't afford a car and can't afford to operate a car, those things are going to need to be there. And when I say 30 to 50 years, I'm not saying that I'm looking today to begin those things in 30 years. I'm saying that I'm looking at them today in terms of where we will be in 30 and 50 years, and begin working to get us there in that 30 to 50 year time frame. We're going to be somewhere. Bus system is one of them. Park and rides are another one. If we have a system in Sun Prairie where you can walk or bike conveniently and safely to a central location and then meet up with public transportation, that would be a great feature. The other thing that's going to happen is it's going to become warmer and drier here in the years ahead. Climate change is a reality. And so you will be able to bike conveniently here much more the year than you're doing now. I think those are some of the solutions, and I think they are going to occur in this period of time, and that's how we do it. It's use the public transportation system.
You're asking more about low-income jobs or tied to bicycling, or are you talking about just jobs?
I'm talking about some of the low-income neighborhoods. Some of the people that I've talked to have never gone under 151 to the west side.
Okay.
It just in their life, they shop,
Okay.
they walk, they stay on the side of 151. So with all of the workforce or the jobs really opening up on the west side, how can we take the low-income neighborhoods that are on the east side of 151
One of
and
my
help
initiatives.
connect people? Bicycling is one way. There are other ways, but I just wanted to know what ideas you had for helping make that happen.
One of my initiatives is the reconstruction, the redesign of West Main Street. I think it's somewhat embarrassing to drive through that corridor and see the vacant lots and businesses that are out of business. I know the city has talked about it, but there really isn't much to show for it. A new TIF district was created and all that, but there's a long road that needs to be followed. I think that corridor needs to be aggressively redeveloped, like we did the west side, like we did downtown, to bring in those kinds of businesses so people can bike to work, smaller, they call it mixed use, which means residences and like a 2-3 story kind of thing with small businesses below. So people just they live there and they can walk to the store. They don't have to get in a car and go over to the west side or wherever. So that's a long-term project, but the city needs an aggressive plan, strategic plan in terms of development. It does mean jobs. That means job creation hopefully at many levels. It also means new housing and frankly a better looking West Main Street.
Well, there's lots of areas we could cover on that question. I think one of the things, and again, there's all different segments of the population that we could look at in terms of low income. One of the things that we've been very proud of in Sun Prairie for a long time is Sun Prairie Taxi. Are there changes that will come to Sun Prairie Taxi over the years? Absolutely. And a new vendor actually starting this year. There's been some bumps in the road, but again, I think we continue to move in the right direction in terms of increasing hours that are available in terms of taxi rides and things. Certainly, like I said, there have been some bumps in the roads, and that there was the last time we changed vendors, and unfortunately, people aren't going to continue to be our vendor forever either. So we have to make accommodations for that. But Sun Prairie Taxi is very unique in that it takes low income or people of greater than low income wherever they need to go point to point in the shared ride taxi model. There will certainly be connections into Madison. We already make those connections through Sun Prairie Taxi in terms of a couple different transport points. The east side of Madison, there's a park and ride lot that we connect to. There's a point at High Crossing that we connect to, and also at Easttown. That we will take the Sun Prairie Taxi outside of the city of Sun Prairie. I think there will also be a connection or two potentially inside the city of Sun Prairie where there can be park and ride or bike and ride or a lot of those sorts of challenges. I don't disagree that part of it is also dispersing the types of businesses that we have throughout the community, because if you have everything that you need and we're able to create many of those businesses on both sides of town, that actually makes it more convenient to folks to be able to bike to be able to walk to be able to get to in general. And so there was some discussion about TIF 11. If you think of, if you say, well, the west side has just, we've taken a much different approach. Well, you know what? The west side was some of the best irrigated farmland for a long time. And as we've started to come out of the economic recession, we've seen a lot of improvements. we want to bring a lot of those same improvements to Main Street because that's a much more central location. Provide housing for people of all different types along Main Street. One of the projects that we're talking about right now may actually have a mixed resident type situation in it. And I disagree with Mr. Clausius that we haven't done anything on Main Street. I think you're going to see some of the fruits of that labor pay a lot of dividend. You might have heard recently about the sale of the Hanley property. It wasn't because somebody just wanted to own a bunch of dirt and old buildings. It's because they wanted to do something with it. And so we continue to work on various strategic sites, no different than we did on the west side of Sun Prairie. We identified things that were going to be traffic drivers and drivers of other businesses to come to that area. We incentivize those people to come there. We'll do the same thing on Main Street because that's what brings critical mass in terms of traffic volume, and I don't mean that in terms of cars, I mean that in all types of customers. So we will do some of the same things. Certainly that area is a little bit behind the west side in terms of when we started. Again, we redid that TIF district actually, it just finished in December. We had one there for some time that was right before the recession, and the value of all those properties went down, reduced what we could do there. And so we've taken some steps. We continue to work with developers to try and bring some improvements to many of those businesses. And I think those are the types of things that we can do to, again, provide more ways for everybody to participate in the economy here in Sun Prairie.
Sort of on the same subject, speaking about Main Street, I think that a big part of having a community feel to a town like Sun Prairie is having those local, smaller businesses. How are we gonna, in the future, continue to be able to support those smaller businesses if it seems like the city is bringing in as many big box sort of stores as they can? How do we keep the smaller businesses competitive for that?
Well, we're not gonna put a big box on Main Street, certainly. I guess the city, I think all of us would agree, the big box are more regional retailers. They're not simply community retailers. That we're talking about perhaps more specialty shops, smaller markets. I think the neighborhoods will be, just by convenience sake, will be willing to patronize those businesses. The Century Store was successful for so many years because people in that neighborhood walked to the Century Store to get their groceries, and it became more of a community center. I'd like to see that return. If you don't pay attention to the core of your city, the neighborhoods will start to fail too, and that is not a good thing for any of us. You don't want to have, like some of the bigger cities where the central core deteriorates and the outer edges are successful. So that's my concern. It's a social concern as well as a development concern too for the central core. I realize the city spent a lot of money repaving Main Street. That's a good start, but again, and it's great that Mr. Freund talks about the Hanley property being sold, but my point is you need to have a strategic plan. You can't do this piecemeal. It's not going to be a cohesive neighborhood if you do it, a thrift store here and a used car lot there and a nice beautiful building that houses people over there. You have to have it put together nicely in a planned fashion. So I think the neighborhoods will support those little businesses. Yeah, they have to be the right businesses, but we're not going to build Best Buy down in the center of town.
Well, that's a good question. The city has done, I think it's 5 studies on the West Main Street corridor. And you can see the results of all those studies. It's just difficult. When you go to the far west side and you've got raw land, it's easy for somebody to come in with the proper zoning and the proper financing to build something because there's not a lot of hindrance. But when you're in an area that has been developed and now you want to come in and do something new, you've got to collect the parcels that you want to do, but you've got things on those parcels, buildings. You've got to get rid of those buildings, so you've got more cost into that. So maybe it's an aspect that the city needs to be more aggressive